A lot of people are launching their campaigns on ads without even knowing how much their product costs. It's like they launch their campaign and then they're like, right, now I'm going to figure it out. Whereas in actual fact, I would rather you figure it out and know exactly the sample quality you're getting, the factory you're working with, the price that you're getting, your delivery time, and then you can launch with full confidence.
Hey everyone, welcome to the LaunchBoom podcast. Today we have Kian Golzari. He is a sourcing expert who has been living and working in China since 2010, visiting over 500 factories and has sourced over 2,500 products. His global client list includes the NBA, Olympics, United Nations, retailers across the UK and the US, as well as e-commerce stores. Keon has won numerous international awards, including the Sunday Times Fast Track Award for top 100 UK companies in export growth. Keon is the sourcing expert here at LaunchBoom, and you can learn more about the SourceBoom program at sourceboom.com. Welcome to the podcast, Keon.
Kevin, thanks so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure. Can't wait to dive in.
You know, for this podcast, we've had a lot of people on the podcast who are existing crowdfunders or existing clients or past clients of LaunchBooms. So it's fantastic to change it up a little bit, to have you on, someone from our team. So you've been sourcing products for a long time now. Can you just tell me how you got into that? Like, what got you motivated in going to China? Because it's hard, right? I've done it a few times myself, but you've done it 2,500 times. Why keep doing it?
Honestly, I would say I'm so lucky because I found my passion at an early age. My dad started a brand, a camping and outdoor brand called Highlander in the UK, and he was going to China about 25 years ago, kind of when it was coming out of a communist rule and they were allowing sort of companies to develop their own factories and stuff like that. So as a kid growing up, like 5, 6, 8, 10 years old, I would always see my dad every year going to China, always coming back with really cool, weird gifts, always telling like crazy stories and stuff like that. So from a kid, I was always like, thinking about what happens in China. I was always curious, right? And then growing up, I would always work in my dad's business every single summer, like, packing boxes, sending goods out, working in buying department. And just my mind was always curious for product development. And then when I graduated university, my dad was like, hey, do you want to come out to China? Come with me. I'll show you, how we develop products, all that sort of stuff. I was like, yeah, cool. Just kind of went with an open mind. And my mind was blown. Like the first factory I ever went to was a backpack factory. And what was crazy about that was that, when you think of a backpack, you think about one unit in a store on a shelf. But when you see it in a factory, you see it in 30 different pieces. Like you see the shoulder strap, the foam that goes in the shoulder strap, the webbing, the buckles, the pullers, the inside lining, the waterproof coating, and you see it get assembled stage by stage. And now all of a sudden, like when you think about, right, I need to make this $15 product, like $12, now you've got 30 different calculations you can go to in your head. It's like you almost now think in 3D. And then seeing that across, 500 other factories that I've been to, my mind was blown. So what started off as like a 2-3 week trip, I came back to the UK and Scotland to where I grew up, grabbed my things, went back to China, set up an office there, moved there, and then just every week going to different factories, developing different products, for the family business. So I was very, very lucky that I had a curiosity from a young age, and then I got sort of mentored to be out there. And then, most recently, just turning that passion into educating as well.
Yeah, so I want to come back to that and double click into that, but what is SourceBoom, and elaborate a little bit more on that?
Sure. So SourceBoom just came out of a need because, I got involved with LaunchBoom. Joe reached out to me. I think he saw some content that I posted online on my YouTube channel or something like that. And then he was like, hey, we would love to chat with you further about, bringing your product development expertise and supply chain expertise into the program, into LaunchBoom. So I was like, yeah, why not? Cool. Got a call with Mark as well. I was like, you guys all seem like amazing people. And for me, it's really exciting to be involved in the crowdfunding industry because crowdfunding is products that solve problems, which has innovations. So as a product developer, a lot of the projects that I was seeing within LaunchBoom were challenging projects. So I was like, this brings out the best in me. So it's very, very exciting. And then I jumped on a call. We were doing like weekly sort of calls within the community, just answering questions. And what was really cool was like being on Zoom, I could see people's faces, and when I was talking, like their jaws were like, whoa. And it was crazy for me because, like, you know, I've done a lot of work within the e-commerce industry, Amazon, Shopify, and all that. But within crowdfunding, I don't think there's really a person or a project or a system for product development and supply chain, which is such a vital part of the process. And as we started doing these calls and people were getting more and more engaged, we kind of identified that there's a need here to help people with their product development process, to find the best factories, to get the best prices, so you can like accurately launch your crowdfunding campaign, knowing exactly how profitable you are. But spending a bit of time in the community, I kind of realized that a lot of people are launching their campaigns on ads without even knowing how much their product costs. It's like they launch their campaign and then they're like, right, now I'm going to figure it out. Whereas in actual fact, I would rather you figure it out and know exactly the sample quality you're getting, the factory you're working with, the price that you're getting, your delivery time, and then you can launch with full confidence. So that's why we developed SourceBoom, to essentially give you a step-by-step guide. And there's a lot of training and education and videos that you can watch, as well as templates and forms and documents and checklists, as well as weekly calls with myself where I kind of take you every step of the way. And one really cool thing that we implemented there was 4 key milestones, which is like me helping identify and confirm your specification sheet, helping identify your supplier, then helping you identify your costings to make sure you're definitely profitable, calculate the product cost, the shipping cost, and the import duty cost, and then helping finalize that purchase order as well. So you have like confidence every single step of the way to have the complete product.
Yeah, I mean, just from launching products myself and seeing a lot of our clients and partners go through this entire process, thinking that they have the products honed in or nailed down with 1 or 2 suppliers, only to find out later on that the quality isn't up to their standard. And that's very tough. It puts you in a really tough position, especially when you've sold $1 million of product in pre-order and crowdfunding, right? And that's where we really saw the gap to potentially bring you in to help fill those gaps and assist our clients along the way. So it's such a great compliment to crowdfunding, your skill sets. And I couldn't think of a better fit with someone who was literally, from your story, who was literally born to do this, right, Keon? So super excited to have you on board here at LaunchBoom and to bring in your 10 plus years of expertise to our clients. So what are some of the common mistakes that you see people make within and outside of crowdfunding?
I would say, especially within crowdfunding, it's really launching a product without knowing your accurate product cost. Now, a lot of people might have an idea for a product and they're like, right, okay, fantastic. They might go on Alibaba.com, they might type in a similar product and get an idea of a price. But really, I want to figure out an exact price, and not only like the price of the product, but what would be the setup costs as well. Because crowdfunding typically has unique products, right? It normally will require a mold or a setup cost. And that mold or setup cost can vary from $500 to $50,000, depending on how innovative the actual product is. So one of the big mistakes I see is not actually knowing what your initial product cost is before you launch. On top of that as well, I think the quality control process is so important, and it does get neglected a little bit as well from what I've seen. And very simply, you have to confirm your samples. So I would say like the main sample is your pre-production sample, and that might take several samples till you get to that stage. But essentially, you have to have a sample in your hand that you're like, I am 100% happy with the sample. Because of the sample, I can now pay you my deposit to go into production, and I'm happy to launch my campaign because I'm happy with the sample. But I see a lot of people where they're like, the supplier's like, yeah, no problem, we can do that. And then they're like, yeah, for mass production, yeah, we'll fix it. But then you launch your campaign and then you get your sample and you're like, this is not correct. And then now your costs can skyrocket as well because you have to make tweaks to the product. But the pre-production sample is the first one that you need. Then let's say you do the production and everything's great. Then I would request a pre-shipment sample, and you should have 2 of them hand in hand. So this is what I agreed for you to start production with. You've done the mass production, and now this is a sample from the mass production, and they should be exactly the same. And if there's anything you're not happy with the pre-shipment sample, at least you can solve that while the goods are still at source in the factory, right? And a lot of people might say, well, hey, what happens if my factory just sends me 2 perfect samples, but then the product quality is actually something completely different? And that's why we send in a pre-shipment inspection company. And that's a third-party company that will go into the factory. They charge about $200 for this. And they just go in and check that, hey, you've ordered 1,000 units, 1,000 units are there. We've opened, 200 pieces randomly out of the boxes. We've tested the products, we've scanned the barcodes, everything works. And that ultimately helps you sleep at night knowing that I've spent $50,000 on this purchase order, the goods are on water, and I have a report in my hand that these goods are absolutely fine. Whereas like you don't want to be like just unsure of what am I actually getting here. So the quality control process, I would say, is also very, very important. And then we touched on it briefly as well, as the costing analysis is so important as well in terms of knowing exactly how profitable you are with your setup cost, your product cost, your shipping cost, and your import duty cost. And I developed something within LaunchBoom, which is essentially a costings calculator, where all you have to do is plug in the quantity that you want to order, the price of your product, and the carton dimensions. And from the carton dimensions, we can calculate how many units fit in a container. As a result, we can calculate the shipping cost. I also help you calculate the import duty cost. And then that all gets inputted in, and then to the cent, it will tell you how much it will cost you to land this product into your warehouse. So then you can just input what your selling price will be, and it will automatically tell you how profitable you are. And then once you see that, you're like, actually, my profit margin isn't what I thought it should be. Now let's make some tweaks to the product to then bring that price down so that I can be as profitable as I want it to be. And another thing that we developed within LaunchBoom is like having that specification sheet, which has all the details of your product, which I also feel gets neglected. But as a result of having that specification sheet, now we can actually get very, very accurate pricing because all the suppliers are quoting like for like, we're comparing apples with apples. And on that specification sheet, it's, like product dimensions, product materials, Pantone colors required, branding requirements, any sort of testing requirements, and that's all in there. And then once we've identified that, then we can also get the supplier to send us what's called a BOM, a bill of materials. So if I'm making a backpack, I'm going to have a bill of materials of the fabric consumption, what type of buckles are being used, what type of zips are being used, what inside lining looks like, what the webbing looks like. Is it nylon? Is it polyester? What type of coating does it have? And now if I've got that $15 product, I've now got this list of per piece of fabric, how much it's costing me. And I'm like, right, well, I don't need that nylon. Let me switch it to polyester and see the price drop. So these are the levels of detail that we get into to really have to give you the best supplier, the best price, the best product, the best quality, so you can launch with full confidence and have a fantastic campaign.
Thanks for that super detailed answer, man. I feel like people could get so much value just out of re-listening to that. And a lot of those things you share in your YouTube channel and your content, etc. And for someone doing it for the first time and they already have a couple factories, lined up, and they have suppliers, they have samples, they're like, hey, I feel like I already know what's going on. And of course, I'm going to have a sample, pre-production sample that's going to look like the final product. And I guess just to highlight that one point there, when you get to that point, you've gone through so many, at least I can speak for myself, I've gone through so many iterations of the prototype, right? Where I'm like, the product is 98% there. Like, yeah, the factory is going to tell me last 2% stuff will get done in production, or will get done in, we can only do that with tooling. No, you have to be stern, guys. Whoever's listening to this, you have to be stern. Take it from 98% to 100% before you make payment and start production. Just wanted to highlight that because I've made that mistake myself before as well, right? Now, the question I'm asking, Keon, is when someone's gone through some of these processes and say, hey, yeah, I already kind of know what I'm doing, but they don't know a lot of what they don't know, right? Like all the little things that can come along the way, like needing to be stern, going from 98% of a perfect pre-production sample to 100% pre-production sample. What would you tell that person that thinks, hey, I already know what's going on, Keon? Of course, I'm going to get a pre-production sample. Of course, I'm going to get QC checked before I receive the products. Of course, XYZ.
Sure. I think that within supply chain, there's so many different ways where we can optimize as well, because a lot of people just kind of look at, okay, quality, price, but there's actually so many other things that we can optimize for you to have like the best campaign possible. And this could be down to, like, let's say you have a import HS code at 12%. There's some things that we could do to get it down to like 4%. Or let's say, for example, your carton dimensions, well, your shipping cost is going to be X as a result of it being in this type of carton. But hey, if we optimize for the container, or if we optimize for the pallet loading height, we can then get more units on a pallet. Therefore, your logistic cost comes down. Like, there's so many different things that we can do. And, even if, like, let's say, for example, you have $1 million campaign, what if we get your cost of goods down 5%? Then that shows as a significant saving in your cost of goods. As a result, more profitability for you, or higher margins, or bigger saving onto your consumer if you're in a competitive space. And not only is it like product, price, quality, and things like that, but something, if anyone's seen much of my content before, I always preach the importance of, building relationships with your manufacturers as well. And those relationships go such a long way as well. So it's not only do they give you better pricing, but they push your items to the front of the production schedule so you can get your goods delivered on time. As we are product developers, well, so are our factories as well. They're also constantly developing products for loads of different markets around the world. And as we become a good customer and build a good relationship with them, they also offer us new products that they've been working on before it hits the market. So there's so many benefits to be had. And, someone might be thinking, well, I've not been to China, or I don't plan on going to China anytime soon. How do I develop a relationship with my manufacturer? And a quick tip would be that, a lot of factories and people in China, they use an application called WeChat. And WeChat is basically the Chinese version of WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger or anything like that. And while it's really important to keep all your order information, like price, delivery dates, all that, to email, add them on WeChat as well, and start to have your informal conversations on WeChat. Things like, hey, where are you up to this weekend? What did you have for dinner? If I'm out with my buddies at a game, I'm sending them pictures. And honestly, some of my suppliers are some of my best friends, and I've gone on holidays with my suppliers. One of my suppliers asked me to give the English name to their child. I've attended their weddings. We're that close, right? But this was all sort of cultivated through WeChat. And as a result, let's say you've got your supplier now on WeChat on informal terms. Well, now you have eyes and ears inside the factory, because I can now get on a video call with my with my factory, and let's say the goods are ready for production on 25th of August. Well, on the 22nd of August, I can do a video call with my supplier and say, hey, can you go down to the factory floor? Can you show me the goods? Can you show me, are all the boxes there? Can you show me everything's clean and tidy? Can you scan the barcode? Can you make sure it works okay? Hey, we ordered 200 of blue and 200 of yellow. Can you just count that they're there? I can see all of that because I built that relationship via WeChat, and now I have eyes and ears inside the factory. So it's so important to cultivate that relationship as well.
Yeah, the word for relationship in Chinese is 关系, right? And it's I tell people this all the time. Having sourced and manufactured 7 products, it's weird how different it is from the Western world, right? Where we're relatively speaking much more transactional. When I would visit factories, 10 to $100 million, revenue a year factories, the CEO or the founder would take me out to lunch and, share a meal together. It was wild. And with that, they would even pay that much attention to a little guy like me just starting out, right? With a couple thousand units in production.
But that's really important, because it's like a respect thing, right? Because you are not in that factory for a holiday. You're there to do business. And as a result of you showing your willingness to work with them and go to their place of business, they respect that. And they want to sort of return the favor to you to show hospitality. And something that I feel like a lot of beginners forget is that a lot of them think, well, I've only got this order for 500 pieces or 2,000 pieces, but they're this really big factory. Why would they want to work with me? And they almost dismiss themselves. And it's your factory is not thinking, how much money am I going to make from this order? You're thinking about, how much am I going to make with this customer over the next 3, 5, 10 years? So you have to really explain your vision of what it is you're trying to do, what problem you're trying to solve. Are you an eco-friendly brand? What is it? And then it has to get them excited as well. They're like, you know what? I see your idea. I see your vision. I know this is just a trial order at first. I know you've got high setup costs. I know your first order isn't going to be big, but I actually believe in you and I believe in your product idea. So I'm going to be your factory. And I don't even mind to make this first order a break even, because I want to acquire you as a customer, because I can see you growing very, very big. So it's so important how you position yourself. Whereas a lot of people have they kind of go online, they go on Alibaba, they're like, hey, what's your price? What's your MOQ? Oh, I need it cheaper. And you've not really cultivated that relationship with a supplier. But the key words you want to say is, we want to work in partnership with you. We want to work for the long term with you, so that suppliers not thinking, yeah, they just want an order and then they're going to dash after that. It's like, no, we're building something together for the long term. And then that, if you can reiterate that, you'll get the biggest benefits from the factories.
I love that. I love that so much, Keon. The way I look at it, to frame it in like a more Western way of thinking, is by sharing what you're doing out at dinner with your friends, or by sharing, the celebrations you have in life with family, etc., with them directly. First of all, by moving yourself from Alibaba to WeChat, so you already separate yourself from the noise. And then by sharing with them more of your personal things, you're also building, we say relationship, but that's a broad word. To be more specific and put in more transactional terms for Westerners listening, it's social credits is the way I think you could potentially look at it, right? Every time you share something personal, you're building more social credit. And when you ask for a favor, you almost expend that, right? So you want to, like, I don't know, maybe look at it from like a 5-to-1 or it's even like a 10-to-1 ratio of building that social credit and building that relationship for every time you ask them for something, right? And I think the way that you framed it and talked about it, like, respect is such a huge thing in not just Chinese culture, but all of Asian culture, right? So that's fantastic, Keon. Anything else that you wanted to add there in terms of, okay, to the person that feels like, hey, I kind of know what I'm doing. I'm already taking these steps. I already have a sample that I'm pretty happy with. What are the things that they don't know that they don't know?
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel that a lot of people, like, they go to find their factory. Okay, I found one in Alibaba. Check, I tick that box. I got my sample. It's okay. Check, I tick that box. Now let's move on to the next thing. But what's crazy is, like, if you go into like Alibaba.com, or if you go to, like, I look at like import records, I find my I find the biggest players in the space, and I look at their import records and I find their manufacturers, or I visit the Canton Fair. There's so many different ways to find a manufacturer. And when I'm looking at all these guys, I'm like, you have such a choice of who you work with, right? But it's so important that you align with the manufacturer that fits your core values. So let's say, for example, you're sourcing like a water bottle, just such a basic product. You could type in water bottle, you could find 100 different factories. All right, got one, check. Sample approved, check. But really, it's what's your values? What's your vision for your brand? Is it eco-friendly? Is it sustainable? Well, if it is, there's going to be suppliers which make use of like eco-friendly materials, perishable materials. Then they're going to offer you other products within that category space. Or let's say, for example, you're working with like big retailers and you need volume at a really low price point. Well, then there's factories which optimize in that as well. And the quick tip, like, ways to find stuff like that out is that, on Alibaba.com, if you go by verified suppliers, then you click on their company profile, you can select, what certification you want that factory to have. So you can select ISO and BSCI and things like that. And now you can look at all their certification and you can see, well, okay, and this is all verified information by a third party, so we know it's true. If we see, okay, this factory's been exporting for 23 years, all right, great, they're a long-term credible factory. All right, this factory has got 2,000 workers and it's got 55 production lines. Okay, they've got a massive operation. We can scale very quickly with this factory. They can give us the best prices. Or if a factory's got, 50 workers and 2 production lines, well, this factory is more likely to give us that really low MOQ if we don't want to order too many pieces. Or if we want something really custom, they're actually going to discuss and get on the phone with us and entertain our ideas. Whereas the really big factories might be like, no, sorry, that's too small for us. So there's so much information that we can take from the verified information to align with the manufacturer, which will get us the best results, whether we have a small campaign or a very, very large campaign, whether we require eco-friendly, whether we require exports that have gone to North America and Western Europe, because those are the markets that we're going for as well. Then they already have all those certifications. There's so many levels of detail that we can go into that make sure that we align with the absolute best manufacturers for our brand.
Yeah. How do you stand out amongst the 100 or thousands of people that reach out to those same manufacturers on Alibaba?
Yeah, great question. You have to have a really important opening message, right? Kind of like what we talked about before, of not just open up like, hey, what's your price for this product? I kind of go by like a 3-part message. First of all, I'm going to say who I am, what I do, and why I'm going to be a good customer for you. And like, let's say, for example, you've launched a few campaigns before. You could be like, hey, this is our 4th crowdfunding campaign. Here's the links to the previous 3. They've all raised 6 or 7 figures. So now they're like, okay, great. This is going to be a big customer. I want to work with them, right? But let's say this is your first campaign. You've never done this before. You don't really have that like previous history. Let's say, for example, you want to launch a yoga mat. You can say, hey, I've been a yoga instructor for 14 years. I have my own studio. I'm very knowledgeable about the products. I have access to the biggest influencers in the space, or KOLs. In China, they call them like key opinion leaders. So yes, it's my first like product that I'm ordering, but I've shown to you that I'm very experienced in the industry. I've got a lot of ideas to develop new products, and I've got access to a massive sales channel through my influencer or organic reach. So they're like, okay, cool. Yeah, that's a customer we want to acquire. And in my second paragraph, I'm going to say why I've qualified them, why I really want to work with them. So as we just discussed, we can go on the company's profile, verified information, and we can say, it's great to see you have the BSCI certificate, so quality standards are very, very important for your company. Quality is also one of our core values as well, so I can see you're going to be a very good partner for us for the long term. It's great to see that you've been exporting for more than 15 years and have a lot of experience in this space. I've also been in the industry for more than 14 years as well, so I can see we're going to be a great partner. It's great to see that you also 70% of your exports go to North America. That's great because that's also the market that we're entering in as well. So it's great that you're familiar with the quality standards of that market. And then they'll also list all the trade shows and trade fairs they've been to. It's great to see you also exhibit at the Canton Fair in China. I plan on coming to the next Canton Fair, and I look forward to meeting you there in person. And by just saying that, I'm coming to see you, it's now like, oh, they're serious about doing business. So all I've done is explain a little bit about myself and why I'm going to be a good customer for them, say why I've qualified them. And it's kind of like you're telling the factory that I know that you know what is important in qualifying a factory, so they must be relatively experienced. And then the third part of the message is just going to be a little bit of information about the product. To be like, this is a specification sheet, this is the new product we're trying to do. And there's kind of 2 ways you can do that. If it is like a generic product, then you can share the product details. But if there's something a high level of innovation, like, a question I get asked quite regularly within the crowdfunding space is, what if the supplier copies my idea? Or should I share my product innovation firstly? And there's many, many different things that we can do there. Do you want me to jump into that for a little bit?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, so say, for example, I always feel that you have to be very, very self-aware of what is a product that you're developing, right? Because a lot of people are like, what if someone steals my idea? And it's like, well, how did you get the idea for your product in the first place? Did you innovate on top of someone else's product? Because that's the nature of the game. So if you went that way, then maybe your product isn't worth protecting. But let's just say you've got this crazy new innovation. It's never been done before. Let's just take, for an example, an electric toothbrush, which brushes your teeth on 2 rows. It's got a Joe head, like no one's done this before, right? And it's like, well, I talk about a qualification process of suppliers, which is like a funnel, which goes like 10, 5, 3, 1, meaning find your top 10 suppliers, narrow it down to 5 based on the verified information, order samples from 3, and then place your order to 1. So the question would then be, well, do I share my new product idea and innovation with those 10 suppliers? And I would say, if it's this electric innovative toothbrush, which has never existed before, I don't want to share that product idea to 10 suppliers, and then I'll end up working with 1. The 9 which I don't work with have now seen my product idea, and I don't know who their customers are and what they're going to do with that information. So I would always make a simplified, dumbed down version of the product as a specification sheet to then identify, all right, how good is the supplier's communication? What is their price? How good is their sample? And I'm comparing these like apples with apples, and I'm going to do that process 10, 5, 3, 1. And then when I get my 3 samples and I'm like, all right, this was the best supplier, which had the best quality, which is the best price, which has got the right level of certifications, communication was fantastic, this is my chosen supplier. And then to that supplier, I'm going to be like, right, this is my specification sheet, this is my innovation, this is the new electric toothbrush. So only the supplier that you ended up working with is the one which saw your idea, but you still had that screening process of narrowing down your suppliers. But then, of course, it's not always your supplier, which people are fearful that what if my supplier copies me, but it's really the rest of the market that copies you. So the ultimate level of protection is having a utility patent or a design patent or filing a provisional patent on the product. And so that is ultimately the best form of protection. People also ask me about, NDAs and NNNs, like non-use, non-circumvention, non-disclosure contracts. And personally, I don't like getting my suppliers to sign those contracts, because kind of like what we just talked about is that I like to build my relationships based on trust. And if I am telling you, hey, long-term supplier partnership, want to grow with you, want to build with you, oh, but hey, sign this document because I'm worried you might copy me. It's not really setting up the relationship on the best like standard. So I would always just say it clearly in writing in an email, just to be like, hey, this is my innovation, this is my product, I've worked very, very hard on this. I plan on growing this into a very big, successful business with you. Please confirm you will not share this information with any other customers, and just keep this information purely confidential so we can grow this into a very large business together. And they'll be like, yep, we confirm. And that's kind of like the honor agreement. And I would much rather work in that format rather than getting them to sign a contract.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that, because that really uses up all your social credit by asking them to sign a document like that, right?
Yeah, and also that document isn't really enforceable either, right? Because let's say you have that NNN document and it's written in both English and Chinese and it's stamped and it's legally binding, right? Are you really going to get on a plane and go to China and sue them in a Chinese court? And if you do, what is that time and what is that cost looking like for you? And then do you even have any experience in that country doing any legal battles? So I would rather just say, I could have given you a contract, but rather just build this on trust. And then that's the best foundation.
That's right. And I would even take that one step further and say, hey, is even a patent that enforceable? Because it is, obviously the larger companies will fight it, etc. But if someone infringes on your patents, and I just haven't seen that many small companies, under $10 million in revenue enforce a patent.
So this is really interesting, because I feel patents is a really good defense mechanism to scare people off. So to your point, like, wow, legally, how enforceable is it? Well, especially when you have a large tooling cost, right? Let's say your mold cost is $10,000 and someone sees your product and they're like, you know what, I want to copy that. And then they see, like, on your listing, it says patent pending or patent issued, and you give the patent number. And then they go to, like, get a quote, and the supplier says, all right, $10,000 mold cost. That person's now rethinking it, because they're like, well, there is a patent, and I have to pay $10K before I even manufacture any products. And then they might take me off sale because I'm infringing. So but if that patent thing was not there, then they're like, yeah, cool, we can make this, no problem. And they're not worried about sort of losing that initial investment. So I think it's more of a scare tactic. And the other thing as well is that the type of patent is really important. So you get design patent or utility patent, design obviously being what the product actually looks like, right? And that is something I feel that is really easy to get around, because like I developed the first, like, sort of, how would you say, like, oval sleeping bag, like a sleeping bag which is like an American football shape, right? So that you could, like, stretch your arms out wide, legs go out wide, because sleeping bags are typically like envelope shaped or mummy shaped, where you just sort of like packed like this tight space, right? But like I developed this one where I'm like, all right, cool, we can move in these different shapes. And that became really, really popular in the UK. A lot of retailers adopted it and it was patent protected. And then a year later, every other brand launched their own version, but all they did was make the sleeping bag a little bit shorter and a little bit wider. And now the shape is different, so they're no longer infringing. But a utility patent is something that really holds, because you're now like patenting the function of the product. And that's something that you can't really get around. But that's also a lot more expensive. Like a design patent typically costs around $4,000. Utility patent typically around $15,000. And design patent can take maybe up to a year to come through, and utility around a couple of years to come through. So yeah, but I think if you have that number, that really, really helps as a defense mechanism. But to your point, if a big company was coming along, there's ways that they can get around it as well.
Yeah, no. I absolutely agree. I think everyone, I think everyone should at least file a provisional patents along the way. It can be very simple to do, filing a provisional patent. And then you have up to, at least in the US, you have up to 12 months to file your non-provisional. So it buys you time to really validate the product and the market before you go ahead and make that larger investments. I think the mistake that I personally see a lot of people make is, no, I'm not doing anything until I get the patent. I think that is a huge mistake, because to think that someone's going to take your idea in your head that you shared in sketches and drawings in a light prototype and to execute it better than you is, I think, a little bit of a stretch. Now, when you have a leader of a of a product like you did, Keon, you should absolutely have a non-provisional patent filed and hopefully issued.
Yeah, and then what happens if you spend 15K on patent costs and then you sample it up and then you find that your product isn't profitable because the cost is too much to make, and then you're like, well, I would rather find out like how much does it cost to make my product, how profitable can I be? Yep, okay, I validate this, let's do it, and then. Also, does the market adopt and accept this product as well? Because I would only file the patent once I see success in the product, because you're essentially the first to launch, right? So if you see, oh, this campaign did like 7 figures, or this campaign sold out or reached its funding goal in 24 hours, let's get that patent ASAP. And you can also show that that you were the first to sell, you were the first to develop that product because you have that history. So I wouldn't be in a rush to file the patent. I would rather validate the price of the product and the popularity of the product, and then I would go to file the patent.
I love that. Thanks for adding that on, Keon. So, backpacks and carbon fiber. I don't know if that triggers a story, but Joe shares that a lot, and I just wanted to bring that up. Can you elaborate on carbon fiber and backpacks and tariffs?
Sure. So that's essentially like, you were asking about, I've got my product, got my sample, I'm going to do my inspection, what else could I need to do, or what else do I need to learn? And you're like, well, you don't know what you don't know. And a lot of it comes down to being clever with the import duty cost, right? So as I said, backpacks, first factory I went into, my favorite product to develop. And, the import duty on a backpack from China to the US was 17%, then it went up to 25%, then it went up to 42%, and that was as a result of the Trump tariffs, which are still there. And I'm thinking, right, well, I've got this 42% import duty on this product, and by the way, so does the rest of my competition. How do I get around this? And I went on like the HCS import record website, and I often do this. I would type in like, what is my import duty code? And then next to the code, it says like, what are the materials? And I'm kind of scanning this, and I'm like, all right, how can I be clever here? And then I saw that a backpack of protective material, which they say carbon fiber is a protective material, is 0% duty. I was like, interesting. So I studied that code, and I was like, well, what are the items which have a carbon fiber backpack? And typically for motorcyclists, because if you're a motorcyclist, let's say you have a backpack on, let's say you fall off your bike at a high speed, you need that carbon fiber as like shell and layer of protection. But carbon fiber also looks cool, right? So I'm like, if I've just got a normal black backpack, which I had like a travel bag, and I'm like, which was all like PVC material, nice shine, thick, sturdy material, and if I just add a little panel of carbon fiber, which costs, let's just say $1 or a couple of dollars, I can bring my import duty down from 42% to 0%. So if I've got like a $50 product, I'm now saving $20 on import duty because I added a $2 piece, and it looks cool, and it's an additional feature. So those are the sort of things that, like, let's look at our import duty code. What can we optimize? What can we change in order to reduce our import duty cost, make the bag look better or the product look better, and also stand out from our competition and import it at a much lesser cost as well?
That is so darn valuable, Keon. I mean, that, multiply that by even just a small $50,000 order or, $500,000 order. It's, that would save, tens of thousands of dollars, right? If not hundreds of thousands. That's crazy. And that's just a really prime example of what you don't know that you don't know unless you work with someone like Keon, right? And have him work through that with you from experience in sourcing 2,500 different products. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit, Keon. We talked a lot about sourcing, LaunchBoom, your experience, how to build relationships, getting your pricing down, tariffs, patents. We covered a lot today. And for anyone who is interested, we do have a recorded webinar that I will link to in the podcast. And again, you can check us out at sourceboom.com. Keon has a YouTube channel, Sourcing with Keon, that you can check out for more additional information. So shifting gears a little bit here, Keon, I want to come back to the beginning of the podcast, what you were talking about. The stories that your dad would tell from his visits in China. What are some of the most memorable ones?
there wasn't, when he was first going to China, there wasn't even cars on the road. Like, it was just all bikes, right? And if he ever wanted any Western food, like, it wasn't there. So the craziest stories I heard was like just of the food that they were eating, like different types of animals and stuff like that. And he would always bring home like the craziest gifts, like stuff that, like, carvings out of like marble and stone, and like a globe of glass, but someone had painted like some really detailed art on the inside of this globe, and just mad little gifts like that. But what was really cool, and that I really, really appreciated, was that he always involved me in the sort of decisions that he was making, even though I was like 8 years old, 5 years old, 10 years old. And even though I had no clue what he was saying at the time, later on in life, I would remember, oh yeah, like I remember I had this conversation 20 years ago, and I would face those things later on as well. And what was also really cool is that, what we talked about, building relationships. He had very, very good relationships with the sort of factory bosses, because they were building their factories at the same time as he was building his brand. So he was sort of educating those factories, hey, this is how Western companies like their goods. So even though it was benefiting him and his brand, but it was also benefiting the factories and the exports to other brands that they would do as well. So because they became such good friends, these Chinese factories bosses would take holidays and trips to Scotland when I was growing up. And let's say I was like 5 years old and 10 years old. But those factory bosses would also bring their kids on the trip as well. And now those factory bosses have retired, and now their sons are running the factory. And those are people that I do business with today. And it's like, it's crazy. It's still mad to me. Like, I pinch myself. I go into these factories and I'm like, I remember you came to my house when we were both 5 years old, and now we're running these companies and we're placing really large orders together, and we're introducing each other to other big companies. It's just mad. And I've got photos, like I'll find a photo and send it to you. Like, I've got a photo in my bedroom, like when I'm 5 years old, and there's just like suppliers in my room. And it's like, it makes me feel good, because it's kind of like you were born to do this, if you know what I mean. Like, my whole life I was sort of groomed into this way of thinking, this way of doing business. And I just was so lucky to have an amazing mentor, and just sort of learn so much from my dad as well.
That's incredible, man. So you've sourced 2,500 products, and there's got to be some, I guess the question that I'm going to ask you is, what are some of the fears or challenges that you ran into where you just felt devastated at the time, and then now you're able to look back and say, oh wow, I overcame that, and now I'm a better person because of it?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, of course, if I've done that many products, there's going to be some pretty big horror stories in there as well, right? So I'll tell you a funny one. Actually, well, it wasn't funny at the time, but so I was doing military boots, right, for the British Army, and these were like really large order volumes and stuff like that, and we were ordering like container high cubes, like consistent production, everything going great. And what we talked about, the importance of pre-shipment inspections, I wasn't doing at the time. Like, we did a pre-shipment inspection, yeah, the goods passed fine, okay, I don't need to do it on the next order. We did several orders, everything's ticking along fine. And these are expensive boots as well. They're maybe like $25 at manufacturing cost, and we're ordering 20,000 of them. And then we receive the boots, we deliver them out, send them to the customers. Then we get like 3 returns, 10 returns, 50 returns, 100 returns, and then they're all coming back. I'm like, what is going on? And the returns are basically because the soles are splitting. Like, so people are walking in these boots and the soles split. I'm like, why are the soles splitting? Like, they never split before. And then what happened was that, like, the rubber content in the sole was 40%, but the factory wanted to make a little bit extra margin, so they dialed that 40% rubber content down to 35%. And then maybe they saved like a few cents as a result of that. They're like, oh, customer won't notice, which we didn't. But as a result of such a large quantity that we ordered, they were actually making quite a significant saving. But what they didn't think would happen is that it would cause the boot to fail, and then for us to get so many returns. And then what happened was that the factory then said, all right, yeah, we're sorry, we're going to come and investigate this. They flew over to the UK, they checked the warehouse, they checked all the stock. They're like, yeah, we screwed this up. And that was the best thing, because they took responsibility for it. Where I've also been in situations where factories, when a situation occurs, they like kind of wash their hands of it, and they're like, oh, sorry, no, you ordered that, that's your mistake. And that's fine, but it means that like they're never going to get any orders from us again in the future. But that particular factory said, I hold my hand up, my mistake. And what they did was they remade those boots at their own expense, which would have cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars. They sent it, they shipped it at their own expense. But as a result, they valued the long-term business. And that's someone that we still work with, someone that we do a lot of business with. And then they were able to sort of retain us as a customer. So, I mean, I think the lesson is, one, always do your pre-shipment inspection. Always check the quality of your products. You can utilize like third-party inspection companies to actually, there's a machine which does a flex test, and factories have this in-house. A lot of factories have internal testing. So you can ask your factory, whoever you're talking to for whatever the product is, do you have in-house testing for this product? Yes. If so, can you send me a report of the testing for this product? And then you can get that verified by a third party as well. So you always have a certificate of quality for your product. Plus, you can also use that as a selling feature, because now you can put that certification number on your listing as well. But the best thing about that was, we talked earlier about building relationships with your factories. And because we had a relationship, they were like, don't worry, I'm going to deal with this. They saved face, basically. They didn't want that embarrassment because we know each other really well. So they're like, I'm going to take responsibility for this. But if they said, nah, sorry, it's not our fault, it would have been a huge, huge financial burden. So there's so many different things to take from that, and those things have happened so many times, but you learn from every occurrence, and as a result, and I would always put systems and processes. Anytime a mistake like that happens, I put in a system to how do we make sure this never happens again? And as a result, I've created a terms and conditions document. So when you send your purchase order, we've got that template for you in SourceBoom. I've also got a terms and conditions thing. It's got 15 bullet points that keeps the factory accountable in so many different ways. Where it talks about, the sample process, the inspection process, the order delivery time process, what happens if something fails, what happens if something isn't delivered on time, what are the penalties, what are the consequences, and then this is signed and stamped by both parties. So it also makes you look a lot more professional as a brand as well. So every sort of mistake I've made has sort of turned into a benefit in some regard.
Yeah, it's all those little things along the way where people see it, or suppliers see it and go, wow, and think that you're a lot larger than you actually are, right? And you're still telling the truth, and letting them know your vision for the brand and how big you will potentially become. But at the same time, you're operating as if you're a $10 to $100 million a year company, and that's what's going to earn trust and credibility for them to prioritize you. So that's wonderful. What are some of the things that you do on a regular basis, Keon, that helps you handle, that stress, those fears, right? That anxiety?
It's funny. I honestly love what I do, that I haven't really dealt with that fear or anxiety in my work life at all. I feel whenever I'm in China or in a factory or talking to a factory on Zoom or developing a product, I just feel like I'm in my zone and I'm in my element, and that's what I really thrive off. And it's essentially reps in the gym. You don't get a big body by reading about how to do a push-up. You get a big body by doing thousands of push-ups. And I can only emphasize that, for anyone who's sort of listening to content online or taking courses, at some stage you have to just do it for yourself. And once you start doing it, you just get better and better and better at it with the more reps that you do. And then obviously with a program like SourceBoom, we're there with you every step of the way, so you can learn from the mistakes that I've already made. But essentially, by being in the game, by sourcing your first product, by finding the right manufacturer, getting the best price, getting comfortable. Because what I found crazy as well is that talking to suppliers is just very, very natural to me, because I've done it for almost 15 years now. But what I didn't realize is that, see, people which haven't done it before, they actually get a little bit nervous, and they're like, what should I say that I don't make a mistake? And I'm like, oh, it's like someone talking to a girl for the first time. They're they don't want to screw up, they don't want to get rejected, and it's so important. And something I always say to people: look, if you want to build your confidence, right? Let's say, for example, you want to source a outdoor furniture camping chair, and we go through that process of let's find our top 10 suppliers. I would say, right, find those 10 suppliers that you want to work with, and let's take another 5 that you don't want to work with. You've disqualified them for whatever reason. Maybe they're a new company, or they don't export to the market that you want to sell in. And I'm like, right, whatever you were going to say to those top 10 companies that you want to work with, practice with those ones first. Or take a completely different product. If you want to do an outdoor furniture camping chair, take a flask, take a mug, and just go and talk to them and just see how do they react? And then you start to build your confidence with other suppliers. And then once you talk to the ones that you do actually want to work with, you go in full of confidence, and then you've basically put your reps in, so you'll get the best results from day one.
That's awesome, man. What's do you have like a fitness routine or something that you do on a weekly or monthly or daily basis?
Yeah, it's a good question. I do have a fitness routine, and I'm quite strict with this. I do work out every day, and I just, for me personally, I feel like I get the best results in my work when I've got a good health routine. But not only workouts, sleep as well. I'm 36, so I would like to think I'm still young, but I've noticed like a lot of my productivity improves when I have a good night's sleep. So I wear a Whoop band, and I really try to optimize my sleep by going to bed at the right time and prioritizing getting like 7 hours and wearing an eye mask, to optimize like REM sleep and deep sleep and things like that. And that honestly makes such a big difference to my day as well. So yeah, those are sort of things I like to focus on. And just also consuming a lot of podcasts and audiobooks as well. A lot of people, when they wake up first thing in the morning, they kind of get their phone and they sort of mindlessly scroll. And I'm guilty of that as well. But what I like to do is, as soon as I wake up, before I start scrolling, is I put on an audiobook or a podcast. So even if I do end up scrolling for 30 minutes, at least I've like consumed 30 minutes of some sort of knowledge as well. So I don't feel so bad for it.
That's wonderful, man. And yeah, same here. I have 2 fitness trackers on one hand on me. I have the Things Watch, which in my opinion is one of the best like wearables out there, like 20-something day battery life, etc. And then I have the Aura Ring as my wedding ring. So yeah, huge fan of optimizing sleep, and it cannot overemphasize the value of that. So I think it's talking about sleep, it's getting late for you, right, Keon? Well, we'll let you get to bed here shortly. Is there anything else that you want to leave the audience with?
Yeah, a couple of things. I would say at the end of the day, people buy from people. So your manufacturer is so excited to hear from you and to work with you. And they have customers all over the world. They have customers in Brazil, France, Japan, US, and they very much value that. So I like to randomly send my suppliers like small gifts as well, something that represents where I'm from. So I'm from Scotland. So when I used to visit factories, I would always take them a bottle of whiskey. And they would greatly appreciate that. They're like, we can't get this whiskey here in China, and you've brought it to us. And as a result, all those things we talked about, like having good relationships and getting your orders to the front of the production line and things like that, like those little small gifts like go a really long way. And just offering to do like little random stuff as well. Like you might not work direct with the factory boss. You might work with like one of the sales reps, and you ask them, do you have any kids? They're like, yeah. Like, do they need help with their English homework? Yeah, they do actually. And I've been on calls with my suppliers and help the kids with their homework. And that means the world to them. So all of a sudden, when you're like, hey man, I need that $11, I need that down to $10.90, I'll figure it out, don't worry. Like, you know what I mean? Like those things happen. So I would just say, have fun with it. Like, don't treat it as a business, treat it like a friendship. And that's where you'll get the best results.
Yeah, that was, I guess, what I was trying to convey earlier in the podcast too. It's like so odd, right? They almost don't view it as obviously it is a business, and they run it like a business really well, most of them. But they almost don't view it as a business transaction. They view it as a very long-term partnership and friendship.
So sorry, one final cool thing that I would say is that, like, I love basketball, right? I play a lot of basketball, played in university and all that, but basketball is actually the number one sport in China. Well, basketball and ping pong. And when I go to visit these bag factories, right, normally the factory workers are of like a younger generation, kind of like 25 to 35. And the factory boss is also like, in his 40s, but also plays basketball. So every time I went to visit that factory, I said, by the way, can you just take like 10 guys from the production line? Let's just take them off work. Let's go play 5-on-5 in a basketball court. And they would love that. Like the factory workers, they had a time in their life, not only because they're outside and playing basketball, but also like they get to play with like a foreigner, right? Because like in these like provinces, in these rural countrysides, not many like foreign people go to visit. So it's actually just exciting for them to sort of see you, communicate with you, talk with you, take a photo with you, and then play basketball together, and then like go out for dinner together. And then what's cool is that they know your brand, because like, let's say my family business, the brand Highlander, is on the production line, we're making bags or whatever, and then they know that I'm associated to that brand, and then we play basketball together. And then in future, when I'm not in the factory, but Highlander bags are on the production line, I know the workers are like, oh yeah, that's the guy we played basketball with. So it's just little things like that. There's so many cool things we can do. Like, don't be afraid to, ask for what you want or have those conversations. And there's just so many different things you can do with this business.
I love that so much. I did the same thing with badminton. Just needed a workout while I was there, and they all play badminton. So I never played before, but I joined them and I hustled, or they made me hustle, I should say. And on the gift side, you brought whiskey. I brought a little easier to carry Wisconsin ginseng. Like it's dry, it's light. And just have like 20 packs of those in my suitcase. But those little things matter so much, guys, for everyone that's listening. So, last question for you, Keon, before I let you go. What is a book or a podcast that has impacted you the most that you would recommend to others?
In terms of podcast, from a strategic standpoint, I love the PBD podcast, Patrick Bet-David. I listen to that a lot, just because whatever Patrick is talking about, whether it be like business or politics or whatever, he's very, very strategic in his thinking. And he's got a book called Your Next 5 Moves. And I love that book because it's planning, your business, your strategy, your life, like 5 moves ahead. And I actually am part of like his mentorship program as well. And I was asking for his advice, like as a YouTuber, or like I get to interview people. Like I interviewed like the founder of Reebok and a few other cool people as well. And I thought that he's the best interviewer I've seen, like, seeing his interviews with like Kobe and people like that. But he always gets amazing answers out of them. So I asked him, I was like, when you approach like a high value guest and you have someone like that on your podcast, how do you prepare your questions? And kind of what we talked about, building relationships with suppliers. He was like, and your next 5 moves. He's like, what is a question that you really want to ask, right? You can't just start off and ask that question, but what are the 5 questions you need to ask before that one to get them comfortable in order to answer that question? And everything that he sort of talks about is very strategic and planning ahead like a chess player. So I love listening to the PBD podcast. I always feel I get smarter whenever I listen to him.
That's awesome, man. Well, thank you so much, Keon, for joining me here. Really appreciate your time today, your insights, your expertise, all the stuff that you've been doing with LaunchBoom clients. I think you've probably already saved them, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we're just getting started here. So thank you, Keon, and looking forward to continue working with you, man.
Thanks for having me, Kevin. Absolute pleasure. Take care.
Take care, man.